stayed Friday, Rocio stayed Saturday, and then I came back Sunday, and then I came back here. So between Rocio and I, we're trying to take turns. So they have a little bit of help.
That's one way to stay.
Hey, did you see the triple A?
Yeah. I think it did too.
I was flipping through it, and he saw the billboard, and
Have you seen the one that's on between McCartney and Florence? There's also one here in town. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's study session. This is December 4th, 2023, and welcome to everybody. I think tonight we're going to talk a little bit about our City Hall campus master plan. Larry, do you want to kind of set this up?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. I'm actually going to be asking Mr. Barber to lead the dialogue. He certainly has a fair amount of history about this campus and the activities that have transpired throughout the decades since the city acquired and renovated this particular property and neighboring properties. But essentially, just to kind of set the tone for everybody, the mayor and council had established an action item in our fiscal year 24 annual budget process to evaluate the City Hall campus, to evaluate the potential current and future needs. And tonight, Mr. Barber is going to begin to lay the foundation for a potential campus master plan. And he'll hand the baton back to me as we come close to to finalizing the discussion, just to add a few points at the very end. But with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Barber.
Before you start, Scott, he just called you old.
Well, if the shoe pinches.
Sorry, couldn't resist. It was a softball. It was just like too big.
Mayor McFarland, members of the council, you've perhaps heard it said that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And so this step this evening has the potential of being a first step in a series of steps as we speak about this particular building and the surrounding campus. I tried to bring some history to you. Some of you have experienced the history of this building and this facility very personally over the years, and I understand that. But looking back at least 25 years ago, the need for a new high school and some unsuccessful attempts to get the voters of a community to authorize that, I think it became clear at that time, the understanding that this building specifically held a very dear place in the hearts of our local residents, and without some definitive plan on the part of the school district on what was going to happen here, not likely to be any success in getting a bond issue passed. And so that dialogue began and discussions began about whether or not the city would acquire the downtown campus, and ultimately that's what took place. And the building itself stood here, and then looking back to 1919, 1920, when the school district actually had to have an IGA with the town of Casa Grande, the city of Casa Grande, for fire service because the building was outside of the city limits. And through the addition of the out structures over the course of time, so the agreement was reached and the city acquired the downtown campus. And the pieces began to fit into place after that about what was going to happen. Some discussion about the reuse of Old Main, and ultimately turned out to be, this would need be the city hall, the old gym behind there to be destroyed, the outbuildings on the side. And the modulars that were out there. And the city had a specific need for a congregate care assisted living facility, was able to make an agreement with the developer back there and sell out that particular parcel. Boys and Girls Club needed someplace to be, and so the gymnasium suited that purpose. Our Parks and Recreation operation needed some space, and so the old band room and choral rooms in the auditorium building were used. The old library, which is called Building B today, was leased to others, a Fidelity National title and what have you. So it all kind of fell together, and the renovation project began. You might remember when this building was just really kind of gutted out and redone, and opened as City Hall in 1997. I remember the move from 4th Street over here and celebrating that and being in this historic structure. All along the way, discussions continued to be a part of what was going on in relationship to the auditorium building itself. That's about 1,000-seat theater with a legitimate proscenium. You don't see those very often anymore. And so a lot of discussions very early about reuse, about putting it back into service. There would need some improvements to some of the chairs that were wrecked or what have you. But there was a lot of discussion about how it should be reused and whether it should be split up and what have you. And ultimately, the weeks turned into months, and a lot of discussion took place. But there did come a point in time when there was a decision to, what we ought to do is hire an architect and put a remodeling plan together and bid it out and see what we're talking about in terms of putting it back into use in the most efficient way. And so that's what happened in 2002. I do have to correct something in my narrative, though. I said that it was an engineer's estimate of $2.5 million, and it was never put out to bid. In fact, it was put out to bid. I did some research in the archives of the newspaper. It was put out to bid. There were more than one bidder. Most of the bids were over $3 million. The low bid was $2.47 million at that particular point in time. And so that was the number on the table that the council seated at that time was dealing with in relationship to potentially remodeling that facility. And ultimately, the project never moved forward. There was never a decision on the part of the council to move forward. And so that's what continued to be on until the Community Recreation Center was built, and the public work, Parks and Recreation operation was moved from that building. And so it's been vacant since that happened back in 2017. And ultimately, the Boys and Girls Club was able to move in there as well, and so that operation was moved over. There was one additional step taken a couple of years ago in 2021 when a request for interest was issued for the acquisition and redevelopment of an area that includes the auditorium, gymnasium, and the property that the city owns, and we also just acquired on Picacho and 8th Street over there. Including, there was some discussion in 2021 about, and there were no takers on that, by the way. I think you know that. And then in 2021, there was some discussion as we prepared to talk about bond issue, whether or not we would be able to include anything in that. But not a lot of planning had been done. I should have also mentioned, as I did in my narrative, that along the way, this used to be the courtroom, and the city court was back here. Before that, court was in a little house on the corner of Dry Lake and 4th Street, kind of catty corner from City Hall. And the court operation began to grow to the point where there was a decision made to build a freestanding court facility. And a commitment was kind of made at that point in time in locating that facility on the northwest corner of the City Hall campus. The commitment kind of was that we're going to redevelop this site. We're going to develop this site additionally. And so this is where we are at this particular point in time in terms of analyses, in terms of study. With that, we got direction from our city manager to kind of step forward and begin to develop this master plan concept. Met with Deputy Manager Weaver, and he and I began to look at some alternatives. And it just so happens that we approved on-call contracts with a whole variety of engineering and architecture firms, including the firm that we are intending to deal with, Matrix. And so the convenience of that was within the limitations that were placed on those bids. We're able to meet with Matrix. Stephen and I met with them, talked about scope of work, and came up with a potential scope of work and kind of what we're thinking about on this particular piece of property. And within that scope of work, as outlined in the information you have there, is first of all, is we know that the auditorium remodel, as it was designed 21 years ago, was going to be $2.47 million. Ignoring for a moment on improvements or repairs that would be necessary because 21 years has elapsed, what would that set of plans cost to build today? And we certainly had recent experience in terms of being shocked by the reality of construction in construction of Fire Station 503. So task number one was going to be included, take those plans, which we have, and cost those out with today's prices so that we got an idea of where we are if you decided to put that building back into use. So that's task order number one. We also, in relationship to that, the idea was, does it make sense ultimately to demolish the auditorium and gymnasium buildings? The auditorium was built in 1963, the gym was built in 1971, and those buildings are kind of sit over there as they were. So does it make sense to do those demolitions in the interest of redeveloping the project, redeveloping the campus with various projects? Building B that we moved into when Fidelity National Title vacated that building, Larry was the finance director, and he and I got together and decided that it might make sense for us to move over there. And so finance, IT, and administrative services at the time, we made the deal to move over to Building B, and so we're still over there. But it's aging, it needs work, and it really does need some attention. So does it make sense for us to build a replacement Building B, not only for those operations, but perhaps others as well, either to be vacant in the event of needing them in the future, or does it make sense if there's, for example, possibly community services operation that's kind of housed in a couple of different facilities? So does one building or two buildings make sense in terms of construction costs? Just possibilities. So that's the issue with Building B. Also, the possibility at some point in time of a freestanding council chambers. Does that make sense? This space here undoubtedly will always be preserved, but it does present some challenges in terms of technology and accommodation. So that was put as a potential aspect of this, building a freestanding council chambers on the campus. In addition to that, we know that Fire Station 501 is slated for replacement down the block here. So does it make sense for Station 501 to be located on this campus? There's some challenges and some issues involved, but that was one of the elements of this scope of work. And finally, how might we use or develop the properties that the city has acquired, again, on 8th Street in Picacho? We've owned that first vacant lot for quite a while. We recently obtained the piece that has the old DNA engineering building on, and then there's additional space there. So how might that factor in to redeveloping the City Hall campus? So that was a scope of work that we developed, and we got with Matrix, sat down with them and talked through it, and ended up with a draft, and we refined the draft. And the document that you have before you this evening is the actual scope of work, the draft scope of work that we intend to move forward with. Matrix estimates a project timetable to between 3 and 5 months. The final product will provide potential avenues to accommodate growth and development of the city's operation currently located on this campus, as well as much needed information as staff discusses potential future bond issue questions to be put before the voters. Matrix has familiarity with our community. They've done work in Casa Grande before, and they're very excited about the potential of coming forward. And for somebody that doesn't do this area very much, seeing the technology that's employed in doing these plans is also very, very helpful as well. So those are the basics this evening. We're bringing it to you for information. We have an expectation, we want to move forward with the project, But before we get your input and feedback and direction and answer your questions, I'll turn it back over to Larry.
Thanks, Scott, for the overview. And I think I mentioned you were a historian, right? That's what I said, Mr. Mayor. What's interesting is Scott's going through this history. I've read the document that Scott has followed, that all of you have a copy of, no fewer times than 3. Scott and I and Stephen have had at least 5, 6, maybe 10 conversations on this. And there's one element that I want to just highlight very quickly for the mayor and council that, at least from my seat, has influenced the direction that as a city manager I have been recommending the use of this campus. And that is that early on in following the acquisition of the properties in this campus, the city of Casa Grande formed a tax increment financing redevelopment district. And in fact, that is when there was a decision made to ultimately sell a portion of this property to the Garnett that ultimately could be used under the statutes at that particular time to serve as a revenue stream. And I know that prior councils, we've got the former mayor with us today that was on the council when I started with the staff and part of the project. There was a lot of evaluation over the years about the potential of us always taking advantage of that tax increment financing redevelopment district in an effort to really pursue private investment into this campus. We're certainly not advocating that cannot be the case tonight, but given the statutory changes that transpired about a decade ago, there's really not any current advantages. I think all of you are aware of the fact that each year, Casa Grande, and I know our mayor specifically, advocates to the legislature about the potential of bringing back some type of rules, regulations, statutes that would allow for tax increment financing or some version thereof in Arizona. They are not on the books today. And given that current state, when we've had discussions about growth and development, and as Scott did, provided the overview, you can see that we have attempted to navigate much of the growth that has transpired with the development of the court, with the developments that's been happening here in the city and the use of this space around the growth and development right here on this campus. And I think the plan really does, that Scott has scoped for the council this evening, really continues to take a look at that focus, that we would utilize this campus more as a governmental campus than looking for the private investment and or some type of tax increment financing. Certainly not advocating tonight that does not become a potential in the future, but I want to make sure that the council is aware that at least today, this scope is going to be focused on facilities that we would use in our governmental operations. And so, as Mr. Barber has pointed out, this first step is really just an opportunity to evaluate options that we may have for some level of future development on this campus. It's not making any recommendations or considering any type of specific outcome. That will be a decision that will be made in the future. This is just giving the council an opportunity to evaluate, but most importantly, it's giving us an opportunity to evaluate the auditorium itself specifically, which has been a point of discussion for probably 2 decades. And what are we going to do with that particular facility? And what this does do is it gives us the opportunity to evaluate what that cost might be if we elected to use that facility and renovate it and bring it into a performing art. I think I would be remiss if I did not mention that staff has been working on other alternatives in the community and have had recent discussions with the Casa Grande Elementary School District about potential partnerships. I don't want to go into a lot of depth tonight because we've just started really getting into the crux of that dialogue, but I want the council to know that part of the commitment that we have made to the advocates of this auditorium as well as to our staff as we've moved forward, is that we want to evaluate options and bring those options before council. But I can tell you, based on the dialogue, the early dialogue that we've had with the elementary school district, they are very, very supportive of using existing space that they have to potentially serve the need of a performing arts. And that may be a better path for us in the long term. But we hope to have a side-by-side comparison for staff to evaluate, consider, and make recommendations to the mayor and council when we get to that point. Scott mentioned the freestanding council chambers. Would certainly love to get your perspective of that. I know that this particular room itself has a lot of meaning to a lot of people, particularly if you went to high school here. However, since it really is not a historic use in the city hall operations, right? None of our operations really have the historic significance that the high school and the various classrooms and the like. There's not a month that goes by where I don't hear, yeah, you know, you're up where the principal used to be and the superintendent was down the hall, and they come into our conference room, and everybody is always very thoroughly impressed with the work that we've done and the maintenance that we continue to do to keep this building preserved and certainly a iconic feature of our community. But it is something that we'd like to get some feedback on. If the council would want us to bring more options related to space for a council chamber specifically, for we would be happy to even put a little more focus in that particular element. And so with that, Mr. Mayor and Council, we certainly want to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear from you. As Scott said, we have the fortunate opportunity of this particular firm being under contract under the work that we've done prior from a procurement perspective. We've had good success with Matrix in the past, and we think that they will do a good job. There's a number of other components that will be evaluated if we elect to take the next step. This is really just the starting point for us tonight.
Thank you, Larry. And before I kind of throw it open to our council, I know that they're going to have some comments on this, but I just wanted to reiterate, all this is tonight is a let's look at our options, and let's throw some options out there. Let Matrix kind of come back with some ideas, and so there'll be plenty of opportunity for public input on this process, because it's obviously this is public money, and we want to make sure we respect that. And if we spend any money on it, this is just exploratory at this point in time. So that being said, anyone on the council would like to make some comments? Because I have some comments, but I'll wait. Lisa?
Sure, hold on a second. Well, I'm glad we're here, actually, to have a master plan. As long as I've been on the city council, this has been a discussion, as far as the auditorium.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important for us to really look at, where we see us going in the future. But the cost, is critical. Of course, this is where I grew up. I had lunch in this area here. I was in the principal's office a couple times for good things, but no. So the history and the sentimental value. Of course, I love it, and I love how we're preserving this building and this area. Again, spent many times in that auditorium and plays and choir and everything. So, but I think it's important for us to see where we are and what the cost is, and then we can weigh our options, because it's easy to just say, oh, I want to, keep it and preserve it, but it all comes down to dollars. So, I really, I'm happy to see this. I like several of the ideas. I know we are limited for the council chamber, so of course it would be nice having a freestanding building that's necessary. I think the auditorium, for the performing arts. I think, art is so important for our community. And so if we, have a facility where we can, grow and build on that, that's going to be important too. But if we have a partnership with the school district, we have to see what that means too. So I was happy to see that, what the scope is and what you guys are looking at. I really look forward to some of the details coming back and some of the ideas. And then it's going to help us make a decision moving forward. But I think because our community, we thrive on our history and our culture and who we are. We are an older community compared to some of the others. So I think it's important to get the community's input. So I'm really hoping at some point when we get this master plan, we can, just get the community's input, find out, what they think, just get some input, whether you do a survey or whatever, just so you can see what people, how people feel. I mean, some people really want something new and progressive, but, of course you have those oldies like us that like, the history, but there should be a happy medium there, and I think we can get there. So, but, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm glad it's a short time frame. 3 to 5 months is good. It's not going to be 2 years from now. So I think that's helpful. And so, yeah, just I hope you can kind of keep us involved. And if you're having meetings or anything, let us know so we can share with our, constituents and the community members on what's going on. So, but I'm so happy we're at this point here.
Yeah, and to Lisa's point, it's not all about the money, though. It's also about what the community needs, right?
Right.
So, and you mentioned that too. So,
Right.
so it's a combination
Right.
of both.
Absolutely.
So, Donna?
I think the easy thing would be just, to tear it down, start over. But I think that we're more of a community than that. So we look at the community value, as you mentioned, and I think that we need to look at all the things that go along from property tax all the way to what this campus could look like. And we are out of room. Personally, I can't imagine being anywhere in a council chamber but here. That doesn't mean that I don't have an open mind, but I think because of the history of where we've been and sitting here, it's not just about a pretty building, but it's like a really good building that we can use, that we can have. So for me, I'm really interested in finding out the options, because as I said, it's real easy to just tear it down, but that's not an option that we should take unless we're sure. And I know that a lot of people said, no matter what, we need to preserve it and we need to put the money into it, but it's been 21 years. And the long and short of that is, regardless of, who's at fault, we haven't done anything with it. And so now's the time for us to step up and come up with a scope and a plan so that we can make decisions. Station 501 needs a new home. We know that. We own this property. We know that. So there's some things that we need to look at logistically and being money-wise at the same time, but not losing who we are as a community, because this is really the center of Casa Grande. So I look forward to it.
Matt, I know you have something to say.
Yeah, I should have gone before Lisa, but Lisa said it very nicely, as did Donna. But, as someone who has a lot of history here, eating lunch in here, singing the Messiah and Blue Notes over in the auditorium, you got to look at that, and it's our history, but we have to get a plan, and that's what's the important part here tonight, is that we've never had a plan. It's always tear it down, fix it up. There's nothing else. But I do want to say that we have done other things in the meantime that haven't been so widely publicized. I know we had RFPs out for the auditorium for public-private partnerships to see if someone had an idea, like maybe not an auditorium, maybe a hotel, whatever someone's idea is, but we've had no response on any of those. And I can, just a simple multiplier on the 2.5 million was probably pretty easy to do, but how accurate is that? So I'm glad we're doing that, And I've been, Performing Arts Center is very important, and I've been to a couple around the state. Wickenburg has a very nice one, but it's called the Del E. Webb Center for the Performing Arts for a good reason. That's how a lot of these places get built, is with a big endowment. So if that happens, if anyone's listening out there, that might be a way to get this done. You can put your name on the building, I'm sure. I shouldn't say it. We probably could arrange that with the right donation. There's a process to go through. The Chandler Center for the Arts, very nice one in the middle of Chandler near their city hall, is a partnership with the school district. So that's something else that we're thinking about, different things. The Mesa Arts Center is even bigger, much more than a theater. It's got, studios, stuff like that.
Multi-purpose.
And when they built that about, I think it was 15 years ago, it was $95 million to build that from the ground up. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. Another thing I think that's important is we do have other auditoriums in town. We have, I call it the junior high auditorium still. It's Casa Grande Middle School, Union High School, Vista Grande High School. We have the Black Box Theater downtown, and the Paramount as somewhat of an auditorium. How much is the utilization of those? I mean, maybe that's something we need to look at we can get that information, maybe not in that study, but I'm sure that we could get that information so we could see what we're doing. And public-private partnership, I think, is going to be one of the big things to get this done. And then going back to this building, they did a great job, Foresight, Mayor Walton, former Mayor Walton's here. I know former Mayor Jackson was a city engineer at the time when they opened up the ceiling, didn't even know that had these nice light panels up here. So it's a really neat thing for our city, and I'll say, I don't think this building's ever gonna go anywhere. I mean, it's the heart of our city and very, very noticeable. And the principal's office was here, and I was there too, Lisa, I won't say, but
But not for good reason.
yeah, never know. And, there's just so much history and generations going through these buildings. And speaking of that, we were here on Saturday with the Youth Commission, having our meeting in here, building our float, and then they had some downtime. We went outside on the grass. It's a beautiful day, not raining, thank you. And they were asking about the back part, and I said, they needed that at the time to pay for everything. Would we like to have that land back? I'm sure probably, but it's a good symbiosis right now, and it's something that had to be done at the time in order to afford all this. So again, the plan is the important part, and vision of someone that does this for a living, because maybe it's something we haven't even seen yet, and it's hard to sell that if we don't have some sort of vision. And the last thing I'm going to say for my mom, who also went to school here, she was never in the principal's office, by the way. There's a time capsule from her graduating class in the corner of the auditorium, and she tells me that every time we talk about it to make sure and tell people that we need to remember that. So the class of 1965 has a time capsule in the cornerstone of the auditorium, so please don't forget. But I'm happy to see, because after 25 years, 21 years, I mean, it's time. We've got to get a vision and see what we're going to do, because it's either been tear it down or fix it up, and maybe we'll get some other ideas out of it. So thank you for bringing this up tonight, and it's time to move forward and make a decision.
Well, since we're on history, I as well was in this cafeteria, worked in this cafeteria, sung with Mr. Day, Blue Notes, played band with Mr. Harris in the band room. One of the last concerts that I put on was in the auditorium, all-in-one community choir, which is from all the churches in Casa, Grande that we held in our auditorium. And I think this is one of the questions I believe I asked Larry as well as Steve in regards to that building. I think one thing we've always tried to, as you already stated, preserve our history. I'm proud of this building, showcase it to all my family, anybody coming to town. That's my old high school. See it? It looked like the White House. But anyways, I do understand there's going to be a cost to it, and we're just talking about weighing our options and seeing what's best for us. And I'm in agreement. I think we brought up 501, our fire station upgrade, yes. And I know, as Matt Herman, Councilman, said, in regards to that 2.4, that's a lot more money now just to renovate, just to go in there and clean that out. So it's going to be a lot more money. So we just got to make sure we just be smart with what we do. And I think Lisa brought up the point in regards to our citizens and what do they feel? Because a lot of them feel that we need to be holding on to what we're holding on to. And some probably still going to say, let's hold on to it. But I think the time brings about a change. And with that change, we have to make some sound decisions moving forward. And whether that is even moving out of here, going to one standing building for the council, that we can look into that. I think we should. I know another city across to the left of me that just got a brand new council chambers. And I heard it's really nice. However, we understand there's always going to be a cost, and we just have to weigh our options and see what's best for us and what's going to be the best way. On building, the Cardinal Stadium, one of the big things was naming rights. So that's what you brought up. And so that's just another option, things that we have to look at to see what's going to be best for us and cost effective. But at the same token, that it's going to look very good when it's all said and done. And I believe we have the bright minds to fulfill that and accomplish that. And I'm glad we're bringing it up now and talking about it.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. Bob?
Yes. I'm in the club too, a former Cougar, went to school here. And I think we are, right now, pretty much all on the same page. Don't touch Old Main, but we'd love to see ideas and dollars and what the challenges are. I think we're all anxious to address the issue that's been floating around out there for a long time. But of course, we want to be responsible, and we do have we all have a soft spot in our hearts for the community and for the school. So I'm anxious to undertake the journey, get the information, and toss around ideas and see where we go.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I would agree. I would agree with everybody, all my fellow council members. This building obviously is historic. I mean, this was built in the 1920s, and whether this is still the council chambers or not, this is still a historic building, and so that's not going to go away. So if we build a separate one, that's something to explore. The other two on the other side are not necessarily historic. I mean, they're historic to people who've had experiences in them, and I understand that. I did not go to school here, so speaking as an outsider in that regard. But I also want to look forward to what's best for the city of Casa Grande. What is the most effective use of the areas that we have and the abilities we have to make those changes for the future. And so just making sure this is an opportunity for us to look at those options and to kind of make sure that, we take everything into consideration. And, when we talk about an auditorium, I think and I look at it and go, well, how do we make that auditorium an event center? It's not just an auditorium. It's an event center. It's a place where events happen, where Hootie and the Blowfish show up and have a concert, an intimate concert with 1,000 people, and you have a graduation there, and in the same facility. That's Craig McFarland's vision of what I think Casa Grande needs. We don't have anything like that. We have some good bones, I think, and so down the road, we'll explore those options and and look to the future to make a facility that the city would be proud to be a part of and to participate at. And so those are the things I think we need to make sure we consider. Public-private partnerships, I think, are important. Those are also things, naming rights, as somebody's mentioned here earlier, a conference center, a hotel, you name it. There's all kinds of things that this city is going to need. And where it goes and what it looks like, those are some of the things that we all will get an opportunity to hopefully have an impact on. So, all right, that being said, then I don't know, unless anybody else has any other comments you guys want to make? Scott?
And just in parting, just a notation, you all know that this building is on the National Historic Register,
Oh, yeah.
so
It's not going anywhere.
That's not going anywhere. And the second is that we're going to be paying attention to this day. There are two repeating themes throughout the organization. One is meeting space, and we can't even schedule city meetings in the rec center because it's just booked up. It's so busy. And the other is the issue of parking on this campus. So we'll be looking at those two issues that we deal with on a regular
And parking
basis.
for downtown. Parking for downtown. When we do events, Main Street, downtown events, if we want downtown to be vibrant, those are all considerations we need to be thinking about when we look at this whole campus and how it affects even our downtown redevelopment. So, yeah, for sure. Thank you, Scott. Larry, anything else? Nothing else. And at some point in time, obviously, this is going to come back, and there'll be an opportunity for public comment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And again, we have narrowed the scope on this first phase simply to get what I would consider to be everybody's imagination and options working in the same direction. From there, there's a variety of other components that can ultimately be let out. But, our thought was, let's get it started. Let's put together some options for the mayor and council to weigh in on, and then begin to take that out to the community and likely put together other types of plans capital improvement plans and the like that would correspond with the ultimate options that are established.
And there, I know it calls for like three alternative conceptual plans, and or picking one or picking combinations of all three, into one. So there's no limitation in terms of what we can do and even adding to it. So there's no it's a blank slate that we're going to start with. So okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to stand adjourned until 7 o'clock.